Hey guys, ready for an adrenaline rush? Today you'll hear 3 scary stories that will give you goosebumps for a long time. The Dream Collector. If you want your deepest wish to come true, just put your hand under your pillow and whisper it. He'll hear, but he'll be willing to pay a price. And you won't like that price. I read this phrase on some creepy forum when I was 15. It ingrained itself in my brain and wouldn't let go. Sometimes you read something creepy at night, and then every creak in the apartment seems like a monster's footsteps. But this was different. This phrase didn't just scare me, it called me. I first heard this legend not online, but from my younger brother, Vitya. He was 8 then. To him I was an adult. Almost like a dad, and he was always telling me all sorts of childish scary stories, so I'd either laugh or authoritatively tell him they were nonsense. About a coffin on wheels. About green eyes in a dark room. The standard stuff. Usually I would have brushed it off. But the story about the Dream Collector was different. It sounded realistic, and after all, I told it haltingly, my eyes wide open with delight and horror. Supposedly there is such a creature. It is neither evil nor kind. It is simply a wish granter. It comes at night, when you are almost asleep, and listens to you. You have to stick your hand under the pillow, into the very darkness and coolness, and whisper what you want more than anything in the world. It will take your wishes, fulfill them, but in exchange it will take something of its own. Not a thing, not money, something that belongs to you, something you will stop appreciating until you lose it. Oleg from the third entrance. Remember him? He wished for a new bike, a cool fast one. Vitka spoke. And what do you think? The next day, his dad brings him exactly the same one. He says the bonus was given unexpectedly. So what? Coincidence? I chuckled, scrolling through my phone, and the fact that Oleg stopped laughing. Vidya lowered his voice to a dramatic whisper. Completely. There he is, smiling, his lips wide, but there is no sound. The laughter is gone, as if it was turned off. I rather found it amusing. Nonsense. The boy simply fell silent with happiness, but Vidya wasn't paying attention. And Svetka from the 5th floor. She was bullied in class, constantly called names. She made a wish for everyone to leave her alone, and they left her alone. Absolutely everyone. It's as if they don't notice her now. The teachers look right through her. They don't ask her questions in class. The kids in the yard invite everyone to play except her. That's why she's not around. She's become invisible. That's when a chill ran down my spine. The story about Svetka sounded creepy. Imagine yourself in her place. You exist. You walk. You breathe. But to the whole world, you're nothing. This isn't a child's horror story anymore. This is some kind of horror. It's all nonsense, Vidya, I said confidently, to convince myself. Stop believing in such nonsense. But it's not nonsense. She's offended by her brother's mustache. You're just afraid. He ran off to play again, and I remained sitting on the bench. The stupid legend wouldn't leave my head. That evening at home was especially lousy. Mom and stepdad were arguing again. This was a familiar atmosphere for our family. He was always gone, and when he did show up, he took his bad mood out on Mom. At first she endured it silently, pursing her lips, and then exploded. Her scream was like a voiceur's, high-pitched, desperate, full of pain and helplessness, and I learned long ago to tune it out. Headphones in, music at full volume, and you wait for the storm to subside. But this time everything was different. I could hear her sobbing even over the roar of the music in my headphones. I felt unbearably sorry for her. I loved my mother and hated my own helplessness. Finally, the front door slammed shut. My stepfather was gone. Silence fell over the apartment, broken only by the quiet, rickety bedrooms. I took off my headphones and went out into the hallway. The door to Vidya's room was ajar. I peered in. My brother was sitting on the bed, curled up into a ball, also crying. His small shoulders were shaking. Hey, what's wrong, little one? I asked, sitting down next to him, and awkwardly hugging him. I feel sorry for Mom, he whispered, wiping away his tears. We sat like that in silence for a few minutes. This shared misfortune somehow brought us closer. This Vidya raised his huge tear-filled eyes to me, and said something. Oleg, I know how to help her. My stomach sank. I immediately understood what he meant. Vidya, don't even think about it, I said firmly. These are just stupid fairy tales, fiction. But what if not? His voice was resonant. I want her to never cry again. His childish gaze radiated so much naive faith and sincere love that all my adult cynical arguments crumbled. I wanted to scream at him, to forbid him, to tell him what a fool he was. What if this isn't just a story? What if this is the only way to end her torment? That night I couldn't sleep, tossing and turning, listening to the silence of the apartment. Mom, it seemed, had finally fallen asleep. I thought about Vidya, about his childish desperate desire, and the longer I thought about it, the more obsessive the thought became. What if I try? No, not for myself, but for her, so that she would stop suffering, so that peace would finally come to our house. I quietly got out of bed, and tiptoeing, afraid to creak the floorboards, crept into my brother's room. He was sleeping, curled up, still sobbing in his sleep. One of his hands was clasped limply to the bed, the other was under the pillow. I froze, thunderstruck. He had done it. He had called him. Returning to my room, I collapsed on the bed and stared at the ceiling. What if one wish wasn't enough? What if his childish whispers had been too quiet? What was my deepest desire for them to make peace? For my own father to return? No. At that moment I wanted only one thing. The same as Vidya, for Mom to stop crying. Without realizing what I was doing, I slipped my hand under my pillow. My palm instantly became sweaty, and I swallowed thick saliva. Let Mom never cry again, I whispered silently into the void. And at that very moment, I felt a light, barely perceptible touch with my fingertips. Neither cold nor warm, as if someone invisible, woven from dust and silence, carefully, almost tenderly took my words right from my palm. I jerked my hand away, as if I'd been burned, sat down on the bed, and tried to breathe. My heart nearly jumped out of my mouth. I sat there for probably 10 minutes, listening to every rustle, But the apartment was quiet. Absolutely unnaturally quiet. Somehow I convinced myself it was just my overheated imagination. Nerves. Fatigue. I fell asleep in the early morning. The silence woke me. It wasn't the morning silence when everyone is still asleep. It was a dead, cottony silence. Usually by this time, Mom would already be fidgeting in the kitchen. Today it was quiet. Too quiet. I got up, pulled on my jeans, and went into the kitchen. Empty. In the sink were dishes from last night's dinner. A cold teapot sat on the table. Anxiety crawled up my spine like Liza's snake. I peered into my parents' bedroom. My stepfather was gone. Mom was asleep. She lay on her back, straight, her arms spread out, pale, almost waxy, and too still. Mom, I called quietly. She didn't answer. I moved closer, a lump in my throat. Mom, wake up. We have to go to school. I gently shook her shoulder. Her body was cold. I called again, louder this time. Panic in my voice. Silence, and then my gaze fell on the bedside table. Next to her phone, and an unfinished book stood a small glass jar, similar to the ones we used in chemistry class. Inside it swirled some kind of pearlescent, translucent smoke. It slowly changed, contracting and expanding, as if alive. With a trembling hand, I took the jar. It was cold, like a piece of ice, and a quiet, barely audible sound emanated from it. A whisper. I brought it to my ear. Wake up, son. Son. Wake up. It's time to get up. I love you. It was my mother's voice. Quiet. Muffled. As if coming from deep within the water. Devoid of all intonations except one. An endless, enveloping tenderness. The same voice that woke me every morning. And I turned my gaze to my mother. To her motionless face. She wasn't shaking. Vidya appeared at the bedroom door. He saw me with that eerie jar in my hands. He saw my mother motionless on the bed, and he understood everything. His childish face distorted into a mask of such horror as I had never seen before. It's me, he whispered, with just his lips. I called him, and I barely remember what happened next. Everything was a blur. An ambulance arrived. Then the police. My stepfather rushed in. His confused face. The questions. The fuss. My silence. I just sat in the corner, clutching a cold glass jar, and my mother's voice kept whispering from there, like a broken record. Her last words, unspoken to us that morning. The official diagnosis, sudden cardiac arrest in her sleep. The doctors threw up their hands. No one could explain anything. A healthy young woman. She simply fell asleep and never woke up. Vidya and I stayed to live with my stepfather. He didn't shout anymore. In fact, he hardly spoke. That very silence we asked for, settled in our house. Death. Endless. We got what we wanted. Mom never cried anymore. Sometimes at night, when it becomes completely unbearable, I take that jar out of the drawer, press it to my ear and listen. Wake up, son. I love you. This is all I have left of her. Her voice, which I took from her myself. Vidya never spoke. The doctor said it was severe psychological trauma, shock. But I know the truth. The dream collector took his voice too. The price for a wish. And I often think about how he takes away other children's laughter, their tears, their ability to have vivid dreams or feel the warmth of the sun. Is he evil or not? He takes away what we do not attach importance to. And I know that one night, when this deafening silence becomes completely unbearable, I will slip my hand under the pillow again. But this time my wish will be different. Bring her back, I will whisper. And I will be ready to pay any price, even if he takes my last memory of her, even if he takes my own life. Because silence, the purchase price of your mother's voice, is more terrible than any scream. It crushes, and there is no hiding from it. Don't repeat our mistakes. Some wishes are never meant to come true. You know what they say. Everyone has their own skeleton in their closet. But I think I've got a little something curled up in my ceiling. And no, that's not a metaphor. It happened just a couple of days ago, and I still shudder at every rustle. And I look at the ceiling tiles with suspicion. I think I now understand what true paranoia is. To help you understand this strange situation, a little background. I'm Tanya, a 19-year-old student, renting an apartment in a rather strange building. It's not a typical high-rise, but some kind of architectural oddity from the last century. The 3-story building looks more like a large cottage divided into several apartments. I live on the 2nd floor. The main feature of our building is the basement. But it's not just a basement where everyone stores old junk. It's more like a huge, dark, tangled network of technical voids that somehow connects all the apartments. Why? Nobody knows. Maybe for communication. Maybe the architect was really crazy. My neighbors and I didn't discuss it. We just knew it was there. Each apartment had some kind of hatch or door, leading into this space between apartments. But they were all either blocked with furniture or boarded up. We collectively decided it was best not to go there. You know, like in horror movies. If there's a scary door, just don't open it. And we didn't. So we felt relatively safe. My apartment is an ordinary 2-room apartment. A living room with an exit to a small balcony and a bedroom. Nothing special. Until last night, I considered it my cozy fortress. And so, that very evening, it was around 9. I was alone. My boyfriend was away on business. I poured myself some tea, turned on some TV series on my laptop and walked from the kitchen to the living room. And that's when I saw her on my balcony, on the 2nd damn floor. There stood a short woman, quite an old woman, small and hunched over, wearing some kind of dark headscarf, from under which her gray tangled hair peeked out. She didn't look around, didn't try to hide. She stood motionless, and simply peered into my apartment through the glass door, straight at me. My first thought was, who is this crazy woman from the city? How did she get in there? We don't have a fire escape. The trees are far away, and she's not Spider-Man. But her gaze was completely empty. Not angry, not curious, just empty. She just stared. I didn't scream. I was awakened. You know that feeling when your brain refuses to believe your eyes? I slowly took a step back into the shadows of the hallway, and then just fell asleep on the floor. I sat on the floor, huddled behind the window frame, and listened. At first there was a quiet creaking sound. She was trying to open the balcony handle. The door, thank God, was locked from the inside. Then she began gently but insistently pushing the glass, as if testing its strength. I covered my mouth with my hand to keep quiet, and then the worst thing happened. My phone was charging in the bedroom, at the other end of the apartment. To get to it, I would have to walk across the entire living room, right in front of her. Brilliant, Tanya. Simply brilliant. I sat on the floor for what must have been an eternity. Time stretched out like rubber. I was already starting to imagine the glass cracking, her going inside, and what she would do next. My imagination painted the most terrifying pictures, and then everything stopped. There was just silence. I sat, afraid to move, for another 10 minutes. Then, crouching, I crawled to the window and very carefully looked out. She was gone. The balcony was empty. I exhaled. With trembling hands, I wiped my sweaty forehead. Just crazed, I convinced myself. I saw that it was locked, and left. Left? Well, how? Jumped from the second floor, vanished into thin air. This thought haunted me. I tiptoed into the bedroom and grabbed my phone. My fingers didn't obey. I entered the password incorrectly several times. Finally, the phone unlocked. I returned to the living room. The police were the first ones to go. But first, I went back to the window to see if she was wandering around somewhere below. You never know. Maybe she was waiting under the windows. I peered through the glass, trying to make out her dark figure. Then, suddenly, I heard a strange sound. It wasn't coming from the street, or from behind the door. It was right above me, from the ceiling. Just so you understand, our apartment has an unusual concrete ceiling. It's suspended, made of individual square slabs, a standard solution for old houses to hide pipes and wiring. Between this suspended ceiling and the real concrete floor, there's an empty space, about 30, maybe 40 centimeters. The sound was like a quiet rustling, like something crawling very slowly and carefully, trying not to make any noise. My first thought was a rat, a huge fat rat, unpleasant, but not fatal. But the rustling didn't stop. It was moving. It moved from the center of the room toward me, and then I heard another sound, a soft click, and a slight creak. I slowly raised my head. One of the ceiling tiles, directly above me, had shifted a couple of centimeters, and in the resulting dark gap, I saw them, 2 eyes. They simply looked down at me, the same empty, expressionless eyes. It was her, the old woman. My mind exploded. It was impossible. She was on the balcony, outside, 2 minutes ago. How the hell could she have gotten into the sealed space between the ceilings in my apartment? What black hole had she crawled through? The question flashed through my head for a split second, and then it was replaced by horror. I don't know how it came over me. Self-preservation instinct. Probably. It worked somehow in its own way. Instead of running and screaming, I did something ridiculously absurd. I grabbed the first thing that came to hand. It was the shvamra, standing in the corner, and I started jabbing it at the ceiling. Get out of here! Get out of here, you creature! I screamed like crazy, jabbing the end of the mop, with wild fury at that gap with the eyes. I wasn't trying to hit her. I just wanted her to disappear, for those eyes to stop looking at me. There was a rustling sound, like a huge spider, or lizard falling into the darkness. The tiles creaked back into place. Silence fell. I stood in the middle of the room with that stupid mop, breathing heavily, and crying in terror, and only then did I finally call the police. Explaining the situation to the operator was a whole other quest. Girl, calm down. Tell me again what happened. There's a woman in my ceiling. What do you mean? In the neighbors upstairs? No, in my ceiling. Between the tiles. She was on the balcony first, and then she climbed into the ceiling. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the operator twirling his finger at his temple. He was probably already mentally calling for a team of paramedics, not the police. But I must have sounded convincing enough, because they sent a squad. 2 police officers arrived. Tired, sullen men who had clearly seen a lot in their lives, but life had certainly not prepared them for this. I, wiping tears from my face, and still clutching the mop like a scepter of power, tried to explain everything to them. Look, she moved those tiles. One of them brought a table, stood on it, and shone a flashlight into the crack. Then he lifted a tile and peered inside. Well? I asked, my heart sinking. He called back, brushing dust from his shoulders. Dusty, cobwebs and wires. There's no one there, young lady. I was almost bursting with helplessness. They didn't believe me. They searched the apartment, the balcony, examined everything from the outside. No signs of a break-in, nothing. They looked at me, fresh in his sympathy. They advised me to take a sedative, and if anything happened, to call immediately. And they left. I was left alone. I closed all the doors, drew the curtains on all the windows. But how could I lock the ceiling? I sat in the kitchen until the morning, afraid to return to the living room. Every creak, every rustle made me shudder. And I imagined her crawling there, above my head, in that dark, dusty emptiness. And she was waiting. And the most terrible thing happened a few hours later. Around midnight, the police called me. That same policeman, Tatiana, we found her. I felt cold all over. Who? I whispered. The woman you were talking about. We were patrolling the area, and your neighbor from the 3rd floor called us. He said some old woman was trying to climb onto his balcony. We got her down from there. She didn't say a word. She had no identification, so you can sleep peacefully. I thanked them, and hung up. They found her, on someone else's balcony, This confirmed that I wasn't crazy, but it didn't explain a damn thing. How did she get into my ceiling? How does she move between floors and apartments? Through this eerie space? Does she live there? I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. I'm glad they took her away. But whoever that crazy woman was, staring at me from the darkness above, what if she's not alone there? Now before going to bed, I stare at the ceiling for a long time, checking that all the tiles have been swept. And sometimes, in complete silence, I think I hear that same quiet rustling again. So yes, everyone has their own skeleton in the closet, and I seem to have a new phobia. A fear of ceilings. Don't go into the woods when it's raining on the roof. This story is based on the interrogations of two teenagers found in the woods, several hours after they went missing. They were in shock, and were unable to give any coherent testimony. Only one mask was found at the scene. It was early evening, but Sarah already had goosebumps. The wind rustled outside, driving leaden clouds, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Tonight she was supposed to spend the night with her best friend. Emily lived in an old house on the outskirts of town, almost by the forest. This forest, according to rumors, was not the most ordinary. They said that inexplicable things lived there. When Sarah arrived at Emily's place, her boyfriend Jake was already there. He always loved to joke and laugh. Emily, as always, was bustling about in the kitchen, and Jake was lounging on the couch. He was sipping a soda and looking at his phone. "Hey guys," Sarah said, trying to shake off the bad feelings. "Hey Sarah, come in. Don't just stand there," Emily replied, wiping her hands on a towel. As the girls settled on the couch with chips, Jake suddenly turned to them with a mysterious look. "Have you heard about the woman in the woods?" he asked, his voice lower than usual. Emily rolled her eyes. "There you go again with your stories, Jake." Sarah, though trying not to show it, felt a chill run down her spine. The woman in the woods was a local legend, told by all the teenagers. It was said that many years ago, a young woman disappeared in these very woods. They searched for days, but never found her. After some time, people began to report seeing her ghost. A thin figure in a tattered dress wanders through the woods, sometimes knocking on the windows of houses located close to the forest. She was especially often seen in rainy weather, when the patter of drops on the roof drowns out everything else. "Oh well, I won't scare you," Jake chuckled, noticing Sarah's reaction. "I just thought it would be funny if someone decided to portray her." Emily looked at him suspiciously. "Jake, don't tell me you're up to something." "Oh come on, Em. Just a little joke." "Sarah, you won't be scared. I promise," Jake said, winking at Sarah. He pulled a package out of his backpack. When he unwrapped it, Sarah saw a creepy mask, a pale, distorted face with sunken eyes and disheveled hair. It was so realistic that Sarah caught her breath. "Jake, are you crazy?" Emily exclaimed. We agreed, but Jake was already smiling. "I just want to see Sarah get scared. It'll be funny. I'll just jump out of the bushes, say a few words, and that's it. No big deal." Sarah, though feeling uneasy, decided not to show it. "Come on, Jake. I'm not scared." She hoped she sounded confident enough. This was the plan. In half an hour, Emily and Sarah would reach the backyard, while Jake would sneak into the woods and hide in the bushes, ready to jump out wearing a mask. Time dragged on. The rain began to pound the roof, and each beat sounded like footsteps. Sarah tried to distract herself by chatting with Emily about school, but her thoughts kept returning to the upcoming prank. She imagined Jake jumping out of the darkness, and her screaming. Finally, Emily looked at her watch. "It's time, I guess," she said, her voice sounding uncertain. The girls threw on their jackets and went out into the backyard. It was pitch black, with only a lantern by the door illuminating a small area. The rain had picked up, drumming on the leaves. A chill wafted in from the forest. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Sarah joked. "Don't worry, it's Jake. He's just making fun of me. That's all," Emily replied, but her voice was shaking. They moved cautiously toward the edge of the forest, their footsteps muffled by the sound of the rain. Every bush seemed to have a unique structure within itself. The wind rushed through the treetops, creating an eerie whistle, like someone whispering. Suddenly, a figure jumped out of the darkness right in front of them. Tall, thin, with loose hair, and that same pale, sophisticated face. A piercing scream rang out. Sarah froze. Her heart started pounding like crazy, and then she felt the tears rolling down her cheeks. It was unbearably scary. The figure stood motionless, looking at them. The seconds seemed like an eternity. Then the figure moved, and Sarah heard a familiar laugh. "I told you so," Mia's Shake's voice. Sarah felt relief, so strong that her legs gave way. She fell on the grass, laughing through her tears. "Jake, you're a Turk," Emily shouted, also laughing. "We nearly died of fear." Jake took off his mask and appeared from the bushes. He was pleased with his joke. "So Sarah, I told you it would be fun." He grinned broadly. Sarah got up from the ground. "God, Jake, I almost killed you." "Okay, let's go inside. Otherwise we'll get soaked through," Emily suggested, but Jake suddenly fell silent. He stood with his head down, examining something on the ground. "What's there?" Sarah asked. Jake looked up, holding only his mask. "My jacket. Where's my jacket?" he muttered. Sarah and Emily exchanged glances. Indeed, Jake was wearing a t-shirt, even though he had been wearing a jacket just a couple of minutes ago. "You left it back there somewhere," Emily said, pointing to the darkness of the forest. "No, I took it off when I ran out. It should be here." Jake looked confused. They looked around. The mask was lying on the grass, but there was no jacket, not even a trace of it. "Maybe the wind blew it away?" Sarah suggested, although she didn't believe it herself. "And the wind was strong, but not strong enough to blow away the jacket." "Okay, let's go look," Jake said, but his voice was no longer as confident as before. The three of them walked toward the forest, shining the flashlights from their phones. The rain was getting heavier, and a cold wind cut into their bones. Suddenly, Sarah hit something. She pointed the flashlight and screamed. A small wooden carving hung from a tree branch. It looked like a tiny doll. Next to it, something was scratched with a sharp object. I heard a knock. What is that? Emily whispered, her eyes wide with horror. Jake came closer and looked at the writing. This is some kind of stupid joke, he said. They walked on. The rain turned into a downpour. Soon they came across another tree. This one had scratches right on the trunk. She was knocking on the door. Below, on the ground there were dark, wet stains. Is that blood? Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. She bent down, trying to examine the stains in the dim light of the flashlight. No, it's probably dirt, Jake said cheerfully. They walked on cautiously. The atmosphere grew more and more ominous. Every rustle in the bushes, every movement of a branch made them shudder. It was as if the forest itself was watching them. Suddenly, Jake cried out. He stopped, looking at the ground. In front of them, in the rain-wet ground, fresh, distinct footprints were visible. Human footprints, but very strange. They were barefoot, but so long and narrow, as if they had been made by someone with unnaturally elongated toes. And it's definitely not dirt, Sarah added, pointing to fresh, not yet washed away by the rain, stains leading in the same direction as the tracks. They became truly scared. This was not the rose roof. They decided to turn back. But then Jake suddenly pointed to the tree in front of him. On its trunk was scratched something, made, it seemed in pawn. She will not stop. Sarah caught her breath. She felt her heart sink into her stomach. It was real. At that moment, they heard a snap. Quiet but distinct, like someone slowly and forcefully snapping a branch. The sound came from right behind the bushes. All three froze. Slowly, a figure appeared from behind the bushes. She was tall and thin, just like in the stories, dressed in some kind of tattered dark dress. Her hair was long, dark, and matted from the rain. Her face was invisible, hidden by shadow and tangled strands, but they could see her slowly turning her head in their direction. And this movement, it was too smooth, too natural. Sarah felt that horror run through her. It wasn't a mask. It was something real. Emily was the first to come to her senses. She grabbed Sarah's hand. Run, she hissed. She turned and broke into a run. Their feet slipped on the wet ground. Branches whipped their faces. Fear drove them forward. They heard something moving behind them. Fast, almost silent. It seemed like every pounding of the rain on the ground was her footsteps. Faster, faster, Jake shouted. They ran as fast as they could, but the figure was getting closer. Sarah felt its presence behind her, heard heavy breathing that didn't seem human, and that endless pounding. Suddenly Emily fell, and Sarah stopped to help her. But at that moment, she heard a new sound, not the pounding of rain, but a different kind of pounding. Sarah looked up, and right in front of them, by the tree, stood she, the forest woman. Slender fingers slowly tapped the tree trunk. This time, she raised her head. Her face was still hidden in the shadows, but Sarah felt her gaze, chilling, piercing her very soul. The last thing Sarah heard wasn't a scream. It was Emily's whisper, so quiet it could barely be heard over the sound of the rain. She's going to take me.